Hey guys! Although I posted a couple of sushi tutorials in the past, I still get requests for it, so I thought it was time for an updated version. Hope you'll enjoy. I'm going to start off by showing you how I made most of the rice bases. So for these you're going to take a mix of white and translucent, cut off tiny pieces and roll them slightly. Then place them on top of a base in the right shape and bake. Obviously, if you want, you can make all of them this way. I chose to make a mold. When filling up the mold, you can use normal polymer clay. I used a mix of TLS and then white pastel. And the reason why I'm using liquid clay as opposed to the normal clay is because when you have a mold with such fine detail, some of the lines can be pushed down by the clay. So by using liquid clay, you ensure that you get all the details. After baking, I took them out of the mold and added some details using acrylic paint. Next you're gonna add the seaweed, and for this I cut off a really thin slice of a dark green, then added some texture using tin foil. Then bake again. I then made another rice base the same way as the first one, and I'm going to show you how to make 5 different toppings. The first one is going to be the prawn or shrimp, so you're going to take a really thin piece of the rice mixture, cut out the base shape, and add some texture using a needle tool. Put that on top of the base using liquid clay to make it stick, and add the fins. To make the fins, I took some even smaller pieces and used my blade to add some lines. And after baking, I added the colors using acrylic paint. Next you want to roll out a thin sheet of a light yellow, cut out a rectangle and use a needle tool and a toothbrush to add some texture. Add some seaweed and bake. After baking, I added some watered down black acrylic paint to the seaweed and some brown pastel to the omelette itself. For the next one, I added a tiny bit of pink to some of the rice mixture, cut out the basic shape and used a toothbrush in a brushing motion to add some texture. And after baking, I added details using acrylic paint. You're gonna do pretty much the same thing for the next one, but using the rice mixture for the base color. And also because this one has kind of a fading effect and has the seaweed band around it, I added the shading before baking. For the next one, you're going to start off with a very similar base shape. Then add tiny balls of clay along one side, blend the seams and poke a hole in the center to create the suction cups. And once again, after baking, I added the shading using acrylic paint. For this next one, I started off with a white base, mixed orange and translucent clay, rolled out a bunch of tiny balls and added them to the top. Add the seaweed around it and bake. After baking, I added some watered down red acrylic paint and then finished off with gloss glaze. I did add glaze to all of them, I just failed to show it in the video. Next, you're going to again start off with a white base and then add the seaweed around it. Add a small swirl and the rice on top. To make the avocado, I mixed green, yellow and white to create 4 different shades. I then stacked them, added some pressure on top and cut off some slices. Then to make what I believe is spring onions, I took some really thin strips of a darker green, formed some circles or swirls, and added these to the top as well. And after baking, I added a tiny bit of green shading. For the last component, I took a brighter green and formed a dome shape. And I then just used a needle tool to create the details to make my fancy piped out type wasabi. As a very last thing, I decided to make kind of like a takeout box. So I first cut a rectangle from some scrap clay, baked that and made a mold. I then added a thin sheet of black clay to the inside and I added some cornstarch so it wouldn't stick to my tools. Trim off any excess and bake. Next, I added some clay to the bottom of the rectangle and baked again. I then heated some plastic over a tea light and pushed it over the rectangle to create the lid. Seal everything with glaze and you're done.